Ever since we tied the knot, I've always considered myself part of a family unit with my husband Mike and his daughter, Sarah, from his previous marriage. Life seemed pretty standard for a blended family until about a year ago, when the atmosphere at home began to shift dramatically. Days turned into weeks and months where both Mike and Sarah would inexplicably give me the cold shoulder, almost as if I had become invisible to them. This tension persisted, and then one day, as I was returning home, drained from the day's work, I overheard a conversation between Mike and Sarah in the parking lot that stopped me dead in my tracks. They were talking about Jessica, Mike's ex, and Sarah's mother, whom they had apparently seen downtown. "Even after all this time, she's still so beautiful and attractive," Mike remarked, nostalgically. Sarah chimed in, "Mom was really attractive. Compared to Naomi, it's just so different. Honestly, I can't even stand listening to Naomi talk, and seeing her move around the house is downright unpleasant." Their words stung, but what followed was even worse. "That's true, but think of her as a housekeeper who works for free. It's not so bad, right?" Sarah said, half joking. Mike laughed heartily, agreeing, "I guess you have a point. Even if she's unpleasant to look at, she does have her uses." Hearing this, a deep sense of frustration and sadness welled up inside me, but I couldn't let this moment of revelation paralyze me. I walked up to the front door of our home, determined to confront them, but as I tried my key in the lock, I found it wouldn't turn. Peering closer in the dim light cast by the nearby street lamp, I noticed that the keyhole, which was silver in the morning, had turned gold. The realization hit me like a wave. They had changed the locks. They didn't see me as a family member anymore. I was just a utility to them, an unpaid housekeeper. This moment crystallized my resolve. If they're going to treat me like this, then I'll leave. I just hope they don't come to regret and rely on me afterward, I thought bitterly. My name is Naomi, a 53-year-old housewife navigating the complexities of a late marriage and stepmotherhood. 15 years ago, I met Mike at the company where we both worked. Back then, in my early 40s, I had almost given up on the idea of marriage. But as I collaborated with Mike on a project, I found myself drawn to his dedication and passion for his work. One day, he surprised me by asking if I would consider dating him with the intention of marriage, emphasizing his seriousness. As our relationship deepened, I was introduced to his bright and intelligent daughter, Sarah, who was 9 at the time and seemed to accept me. But as years passed, the initial warmth we shared as a family began to cool, leading to the heartache of the present day. As Mike, Sarah, and I embarked on our new life together, we often organized family outings to strengthen our bond. We enjoyed trips to the movies and fun-filled days at nearby amusement parks. During these moments, Sarah and I shared experiences that seemed to solidify our bond, almost as though we were truly mother and daughter. A year after Mike and I started dating, we decided to get married, and the initial phase of our life as a new family was filled with excitement but also anxiety. At that time, I was still committed to my full-time job, often working late into the evenings during the weekdays. Despite the demanding schedule, I made it a priority to dedicate my weekends to Sarah. We would bake sweets together, I helped her with her homework, and we went shopping for new clothes at nearby malls. It was important for me to ensure that we spent quality time together. Mike and I also made concerted efforts to nurture our marital relationship. We celebrated our anniversaries with dinner dates at special restaurants and exchanged heartfelt gifts on birthdays, always making sure to deepen our bond as a couple. However, as Sarah grew into her teenage years, I began to notice a subtle shift in the atmosphere at home. Then one day, a seemingly innocuous comment marked the beginning of a more noticeable change. "Naomi, have you started to feel your age recently?" Sarah asked casually at dinner, after I had returned from a tiring parent-teacher meeting. Mike, with a smile that seemed to carry a hint of comparison, added, "Yeah, indeed. Saki and Anna's mom are already in their 40s, but they still seem quite charming, don't they?" I felt a twinge of discomfort. "Mike, I don't think it's appropriate to evaluate other moms that way. Are you always checking out other moms? Are you a bit jealous?" I asked, half joking, but also a bit perturbed by his tone. "What I'm saying is true, isn't it? Mike replied, his grin now irritating me. He went on to explain, Saki and Anna's moms, being dance instructors and hairstylists, naturally care about their appearance due to their professions. He then turned his attention back to me, somewhat critically. Naomi, not acknowledging your own lack of effort is a bit unseemly, you know. Well, true, but maybe you should consider dieting a bit, it might help you like yourself more. Hearing Sarah and Mike's words, I felt shocked and internally uncomfortable. I had always prided myself on maintaining an average body shape, but perhaps from Mike's perspective, I appeared slightly plump. Knowing his specific preferences, I often heard him comment on beauties from TV or magazines, and considering his ex-wife worked in the entertainment industry, the comparisons felt all the more pointed. The initial warmth and inclusivity of our family life seemed to be slowly eroding, replaced by a growing sense of alienation and critique. As the days melded into years, I noticed the double standards that permeated our home life became increasingly stark. Mike, who was growing older and less attentive to his own physique, would often comment on my appearance with a dismissive air. I think she should be more mindful of her figure, she seems to have changed a bit post-pregnancy. She feels different from her prime time, he'd say, casually ignoring his own expanding waistline. When I dared to point this out, his retort was swift and dismissive, men don't need to worry about such things. Living under the influence of a father like Mike, who upheld strict beauty standards, Sarah naturally came to value appearances above most things. Her biological mother, a former model for a fashion magazine, epitomized the height of physical beauty, a legacy Sarah inherited with her tall and striking looks. She stood out sharply among her peers, many of whom couldn't quite match her beauty. It was during one of our more reflective conversations that Sarah asked Mike, "Dad, why did you choose to be with Naomi when considering marriage?" Mike, perhaps trying to smooth over the underlying criticism of his previous comments, replied, "What's inside matters most, but isn't appearance important too?" Later that evening, as I washed the dishes from a dinner I had spent hours preparing, I overheard their continued conversation, which seemed to coldly assess my looks. Despite both of us working, it was clear that Sarah never felt inclined to help with household chores. When Mike and I were about to get married, he had assured me, "You can work and relax." However, the reality was starkly different. I found myself perpetually swamped with daily responsibilities, while Mike and Sarah seemed to enjoy ample leisure time, often relaxing with beers and cocktails while watching their favorite variety shows. One evening, mustering up my courage, I approached them during a commercial break. "Hey, Mike, Sarah, can you help me clean the living room after you guys have some time?" I asked, hoping they might offer a hand. Their response was disinterested, their expressions clearly conveying they didn't want to be bothered. "Don't you get how fun this show is?" "This is our relaxation time," Mike retorted dismissively. Sarah chimed in, "Naomi, you asked my father if you could continue working after getting married, right? If so, you should handle the housework properly. To be precise, it's a housewife's duty, since you're at home all day." Until that moment, I had usually let their words slide, but this time I couldn't hold back. "Sarah, you're already 23 years old. If you think about living on your own in the future, don't you think it'd be wise to learn the basics of housework?" I countered, my voice firm yet tinged with frustration. The conversation highlighted the growing rift in our family dynamics, emphasizing the unequal expectations and diminishing respect that shadowed our household. As I stood in the kitchen, attempting to hide the tears that stubbornly spilled over, Sarah's words echoed in my mind, taunting me. She wrapped her slender arm around Mike's, her expression one of smug satisfaction. "I have absolutely no intention of leaving this house," she declared, her voice laced with a dismissive tone. "I'll leave all the housework to you, even as you age. I expect you to continue cooking, washing, and cleaning for me and my father." The air around Mike was heavy with the scent of alcohol as he smiled contentedly at his daughter's words. "But Naomi," he said, glancing at me with a blend of pity and discomfort, "you have an average face and figure. I've been going out less recently, but I used to feel a bit embarrassed to be seen with you, because you're my wife." "Hey Dad, don't be so severe," Sarah chimed in, yet her voice carried no real concern. Their harsh words stung deeply, and as I tried to carry on with my tasks in the kitchen, the tears continued to fall, each one a silent testimony to the pain and disappointment I felt. These tears were not just for today, but for all the days that had slowly eroded my hope and optimism about this family. I had once looked forward to a future with a cheerful and adorable girl and a thoughtful man who loved kids. I knew that remarriage, especially with children involved, wouldn't be easy. But the reality of my situation had far surpassed what I had braced myself for. From Sarah's perspective, I might seem like someone trying to usurp her beloved father's affection. While I could understand her feelings to a degree, I found it increasingly difficult to forgive Mike for his blatant disrespect and mockery in front of others. Holding on to a faint hope that Emily, another relative in our extended family, might grow to see me differently, I had been patiently enduring for over 10 years. Yet now that Sarah was 23, her attitude showed no signs of softening. In fact, it had only grown more rigid and unyielding. Then came an event more shocking than any before. Celebrating our wedding anniversary had always been a cherished tradition, a small pleasure in our daily lives. This year, like every other, I prepared with special care, making meatloaf, a special fruit salad, and the family favorite corn soup. This meat dish tastes so good. The cheese inside adds a nice touch, Mike had said enthusiastically. Yeah, the texture of the meat is also great. I want seconds, Sarah had agreed, and I had felt a brief flicker of happiness at their praise. However, from the next day onward, they started avoiding me as if something had triggered a change in their behavior. Even now, as I wiped away the tears and tried to understand the sudden shift, I felt a profound sense of isolation and confusion. Had my efforts at our anniversary dinner somehow displeased them? Or was there something else at play, something hidden beneath the surface of our strained family dynamics? As I stood alone in the kitchen, the weight of their indifference and the coldness of their treatment pressed heavily upon me, leaving me to ponder my next steps in a marriage that felt increasingly loveless and unappreciative. In the monotonous rhythm of our household, communication has dwindled to almost nothing. Whenever I attempt to initiate conversation with Mike or Sarah, they seem to simply move away, acting as though they're unaware of my presence. I often wonder if they're just not hearing me, or if they're actively avoiding me for some other reason. Despite this, I've tried persistently to engage with them. One bright morning, I mentioned, "Good morning, it's sunny now, but there's a rain forecast for the evening. You might want to take an umbrella when you go out." Mike, without acknowledging my words, continued to sip his miso soup. Soon after, Sarah entered the kitchen, freshly prepared for the day. "Good morning, Dad." "Morning, did you change your hairstyle? That pink highlight looks refreshing and suits you," she said cheerily. Mike smiled warmly at her, gently stroking her hair. "Thanks, Dad," Sarah beamed, adding, "Speaking of which, I heard it's going to rain this evening. It's so sunny now, it's strange. In that case, let's not forget to take our umbrellas." Feeling like an outsider in my own home, I tried another approach. Returning from a business trip, I brought home a souvenir, a box of bikuken, a renowned local delicacy I knew they would enjoy. "I'm home. I got this bikuken as a souvenir from my business trip," I announced as I walked into the dining room where Mike and Sarah were having dinner. They continued eating, ignoring my presence. Confused by their attitude, I quietly placed the gold-wrapped box on the table. "This place has a great reputation, and I've always wanted to try it. Make sure to leave some for me later," I said hopefully. However, the next night, when I went to look for the bikuken, eager to finally try it, it was nowhere to be found. Feeling hurt, I slowly opened the kitchen trash can. There it was, the beautifully golden box discarded amongst the refuse. Glancing at the sink, I noticed 2 plates and forks from after a meal, clear evidence they had enjoyed the gift without me. It's been a year since these subtle tensions began, and I feel the silent pressure from Mike and Sarah every day. At first, I was optimistic, thinking time would resolve everything. However, things haven't shown any sign of improvement. Mike and Sarah talk to each other as if I don't even exist, laughing and sharing their daily stories. Even when I raise my voice and say, "Hey," they don't respond at all. In moments like that, while they completely ignore my presence, they still clearly give commands like, "What's for dinner?" or "Prepare the bath quickly." It's pathetic how I cherish any communication with them, no matter how minimal. What worth do I even hold in this household? The thought of going back to living alone is a possibility, but I just started life as a family. The thought of leaving fills me with sadness amidst all the chaos and conflict, a deep ache that I struggle to articulate even to myself. As days merge into nights, I find myself increasingly pondering my next steps, caught between the love I once felt and the stark reality of my current situation. One evening, my work ended earlier than expected, so I arrived home sooner than usual. As I quietly parked my car and made my way across the parking lot, I overheard snippets of Mike and Sarah's cheerful conversation drifting from an open window. Their voices, muffled yet unmistakable, reached my ears with startling clarity. "She might be thinking of leaving this house soon, don't you think?" Mike's voice carried a tone of speculation. "I don't see any explicit signs, but who knows? It would be less trouble for us if she left on her own accord. If we actively try to push her out, it might look bad to outsiders," Sarah replied, her words ringing with a calculated edge. I was taken aback by their conversation, realizing how much they cared about their image. My mind flashed back to last summer when I randomly encountered Jessica in town. She still exuded an undeniable allure and beauty. Mike's dreamy tone as he reminisced about her seemed to resonate with Sarah's sentiments. Compared to Jessica's elegance, they saw me as inferior. Their candid discussion revealed their growing disdain for me. Interacting with me had become bothersome, and even watching me move around the house stressed them out. However, they rationalized my presence by likening me to a housemaid, conveniently overlooking the fact that I was essentially working for free. Listening to their laughter and genuine camaraderie, I felt a surge of shock and hurt. It became evident that they were discussing Jessica's beauty and questioning their relationship with me, hence the avoidance and silence that had become the norm in our household. Sighing deeply, I held my head in my hands, feeling the weight of coexisting in a home where I was no longer welcome. As I mustered the strength to enter the house and confront them, I noticed something amiss. My key wouldn't fit into the lock. Upon closer inspection, I realized that the lock, silver until the previous night, had now changed to gold. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I was being ousted from the house. A rage unlike anything I'd felt before surged within me. Not only were they ignoring me, but they were also actively locking me out. It was unbelievable. If they wanted me to leave, then fine. But if they came to me for help later, I wouldn't assist. Emotionally drained and judged, I returned to my car, trembling, and started the engine. For a week after being ousted, I kept my personal cell phone off, expecting calls from Mike and Sarah. Fortunately, I had a work phone that sufficed. Before noticing the lock change, I had instinctively placed essentials in my car, a precaution that now seemed prophetic. As I drove away from what was once my home, a mix of sadness, anger, and betrayal churned within me, leaving me to grapple with the harsh reality of being cast aside by the very people I had hoped to call family. After being ousted from my own home, I sought solace in temporary comforts. I indulged in shopping for new clothes, dining at cafes and restaurants, and luxuriating in the comfort of a hotel room. A week later, on a relaxed morning, I powered on my personal phone, only to be bombarded with countless missed calls and messages, 90% from Sarah, 10% from Mike. As I contemplated switching it off, Sarah's call came through, her voice laced with reluctance. "Oh, you finally answered. I didn't expect you to avoid contact like this." "Where are you now?" she asked. "It's my choice where I am and what I do." "If there's nothing important, I'm hanging up," I retorted, bristling at her tone. "Wait, Naomi, please come back home," she pleaded. I responded sternly, "What's the matter? Do you want me to clean up this messy house? Why don't you, and your beloved father, whom you said you love, handle it?" "But Dad never sorts the trash properly, no matter how many times I tell him. He even puts combustible trash and batteries in the same trash bag." "He's always been like that," Sarah countered. "But I don't want to spend my precious day off on such things. Goodbye, then. I'm really sorry I was thoughtless, but could you please come back home, please, Naomi? Sarah's voice softened in desperation. Upon hearing her heartfelt plea, I sighed deeply. Despite my reservations, I had anticipated this scenario all along. Despite everything, why did they decide to kick me out of the house? I need to pick up a few things, so leave the door unlocked for me. Really, though, thank you, I conceded, reluctantly agreeing to return. When I arrived home, I was met with an irritable-looking Mike and a relieved-looking Sarah. The area around the kitchen trash can reeked of terrible leftover food, and used packaging materials overflowed, emitting a nauseating odor. The living room was strewn with cans of drinks, empty bags of snacks, and dried fish, carelessly scattered about. Shirts and socks Mike had taken off littered the floor, while a pile of unwashed dishes and glasses filled the kitchen sink. The scene before me was far worse than I could have ever imagined. I'm so glad you're coming back, Naomi. Dad really doesn't know anything, from basic cooking to how to use the washing machine, and even how to properly sort the trash. Furthermore, he's too lazy to even press the switch to start the dishwasher, Sarah lamented. In response, I couldn't help but reply a bit sarcastically, I bet, because you and your family have always taken it for granted that I would handle all the household chores. As Sarah and Mike engaged in a heated argument about household responsibilities, I couldn't help but interject. At least it seems you, Sarah, know the basics of housework. I've helped out a bit when I stayed at friends' houses, so I know a little. Housework is basically a woman's job, right? When Naomi is not around, Sarah should take over. But Sarah wasn't having it. Hold on, Dad. I have a part-time job after school, you know. Don't you think you should take care of yourself? At the very least, you could organize the clothes you take off into the laundry basket and properly wash and throw away the empty cans. Mike's response was typical of his outdated values. What are you talking about? Isn't it a child's duty to take care of their parents? His arrogant tone only fueled Sarah's anger. The reason I'm in this house isn't just to take care of Dad. I have my own life too. If you don't like it, you can leave anytime. Sarah had begun to notice Mike's condescending attitude towards women, especially his expectation that she fulfill traditional gender roles. As their argument escalated, I watched with a mixture of disbelief and amusement. But when Sarah panicked and pleaded for help with the cleaning, I realized it was time to make my move. The reason I came back to this house isn't to help with cleaning. I just came to get my belongings, I stated calmly. Sarah seemed taken aback, perhaps realizing the impact of her words. Wait, is that really true? You think I'd just come back after being kicked out? I have feelings too, you know. That was just a joke. I didn't really mean it, she stammered. Ignoring her, I proceeded to pack my belongings, clothes, cosmetics, important documents, into a bag. Once everything was arranged for easy transportation, I left the house, leaving Sarah to ponder her words. In the following weeks, my life became a whirlwind of work and other busy activities. I stayed at a monthly rental apartment, and even on holidays, I kept myself occupied with various engagements. My days were fulfilling, free from the suffocating tension of Mike and Sarah's household. 3 months passed, and I received an unexpected call from Mike. His voice was filled with confusion and concern. What's going on? I want a detailed explanation, he demanded. As soon as I answered the phone, he launched into questions. Don't play dumb. A lawyer contacted me, saying we have to leave the house within a month. Why did you sell the house? Mike's voice was filled with confusion and concern as he demanded an explanation. But before I could respond, Sarah interrupted with indignation. How dare you sell our house without permission? We're going to accuse you of this. Amid Sarah's angry tirade over the phone, I couldn't help but find the situation absurd. Don't you think it's my right to decide on the house in my name? What are you talking about? Oh, did you forget that a few years ago, when I got a promotion and my income increased significantly, I changed the name of the house to mine? Dad, really? That's true? Sarah's surprise was evident, and I couldn't help but feel a pang of disbelief that she had forgotten such an important detail. It seemed another parent-child argument was on the brink of erupting. Anyway, I think we should reconsider selling the house. You agree with me, right? Mike's frantic tone belied his anxiety as he addressed me. But before the conversation could progress, the call ended abruptly. In the following days, I received numerous messages and calls from Mike, pleading for forgiveness and urging me to reconsider the house sale. But I remained steadfast in my decision, calmly brushing off his attempts to sway me. When I visited the house a few days later, I was met with a scene even more disheartening than before. The clutter of trash and unused items seemed to have multiplied, casting a shadow over the once familiar space. We're handing over this house to the new owner in 2 weeks. Is this really okay? Have you already settled the contract for your new place? I couldn't help but express my genuine concern. But my words were met with defensiveness from both Mike and Sarah. I've told you so many times, stop nagging. If you're so concerned, why don't you help clean up? After all, we're your family, Mike retorted, his words cutting deep. Over the years, my relationship with them had gradually weakened, and now, as I stood in the midst of their disarray, I couldn't help but wonder whose fault it was that I was completely shut out in the end. It was surprising to see them ignore the consequences of their actions. Forgetting their cold treatment towards me and speaking as if nothing had happened, I agreed to arrange the cleaning right away. Since they agreed to my proposal, I decided to act promptly. I contacted a professional cleaning service and arranged for them to pick up the accumulated trash and unnecessary items from the house. For the two of you who aren't good at cleaning, I'd like the house to be thoroughly cleaned by the handover date, I instructed them. Thanks to the expertise of the cleaning company, the house was quickly tidied up. Later, I learned from the real estate company that Mike and Sarah had found a new home in an old historic apartment building. I felt a deep sense of relief now that the house had been successfully sold. The next thing to consider was the divorce proceedings with Mike and the accompanying alimony issue. However, I couldn't imagine negotiations with Mike going smoothly. With that in mind, I thought of a plan and decided to invite them to my new apartment. As they entered, Sarah commented on the modern interior, contrasting it with their rundown apartment. Despite her harsh words, I endured, reminding myself of the tolerance I had shown them all this time. Just because I bought a new condo, I don't think there's any reason to be criticized, I calmly responded to Sarah's comments. However, Mike's insensitive remark about Sarah's cooking skills irked me. Amidst their argument, I placed the divorce papers in front of Mike. Mike, I think we should get divorced. As for the division of assets and compensation for your past rude remarks, I'd like to discuss it properly through a lawyer, I declared. Mike's incredulous reaction didn't deter me. I'm tired of taking care of you and Sarah every day without a single word of gratitude, I stated firmly, determined to move forward with my decision. Smile played on my lips as I continued, so I thought I'd come and provide some clarity to this situation. Jessica's presence seemed to freeze the room, and Mike's expression turned from shock to disbelief. What are you doing here? He stammered, his voice trembling with a mix of surprise and apprehension. I came to set the record straight, Jessica replied calmly, her gaze steady as she addressed Mike. You've been spreading lies about me, Mike, and I couldn't let that continue. Sarah looked between her parents, her expression shifting from confusion to realization. Mom, Dad, what's going on? Why didn't you tell me about this? She demanded, her voice tinged with hurt and frustration. Jessica sighed, her eyes softening as she turned to Sarah. Sweetheart, I wanted to protect you from all this. But I think it's time you knew the truth. As Jessica began to recount the events of their past, Mike's face grew increasingly pale. He tried to interject with denials and excuses, but Jessica's words carried a weight of truth that couldn't be denied. Listening to their conversation unfold, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. The truth was finally coming to light, and it was clear that Mike's facade was beginning to crumble. In the midst of the chaos, I quietly gathered my belongings and made my way towards the door. As I stepped out into the cool evening air, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It was time to leave the past behind and start anew. And as I walked away from that tumultuous scene, I knew that I was finally free from the burdens of my past life with Mike and Sarah. The days following the confrontation were filled with a mix of emotions. For Sarah, the revelation of her true parentage was a heavy burden to bear, and I could see the pain etched on her face as she grappled with this newfound knowledge. Despite the turmoil, she showed remarkable strength, facing the truth with courage and resilience. As for Mike, his pride seemed wounded by the unraveling of his carefully constructed facade. The financial strain of the divorce settlement only added to his troubles, and it was clear that he was facing the consequences of his actions. Meanwhile, I found solace in the knowledge that justice had been served. The truth had prevailed, and I was finally free from the toxic dynamics of my past marriage. With each passing day, I felt a sense of liberation and empowerment, knowing that I had taken control of my own destiny. In the end, the road ahead was uncertain, but I faced it with newfound resolve and determination. As I walked away from the apartment building, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, leaving behind the pain and heartache of the past. Ahead of me lay a future filled with possibility and hope, and I was ready to embrace it with open arms. As time passed, the aftermath of the divorce settled into a new normalcy. Sarah's journey towards independence was fraught with challenges, yet she faced them with determination and resilience. Witnessing her transformation from a dependent daughter to a self-reliant young woman filled me with pride and admiration. Despite the hardships she encountered, Sarah remained steadfast in her pursuit of a better life, determined to break free from the constraints of her past. Meanwhile, Mike's life took a downturn as the consequences of his actions caught up with him. Stripped of his former comforts and facing the harsh realities of his situation, he found himself adrift in a sea of uncertainty. The once proud and confident man now grappled with the consequences of his past decisions, grappling with the harsh realities of his current circumstances. As for me, I found solace in the newfound peace and freedom of my post-divorce life. Freed from the shackles of a toxic relationship, I embraced each day with a renewed sense of purpose and optimism. The scars of the past faded into insignificance as I focused on building a brighter future for myself. In hindsight, the decision to divorce was undoubtedly the right one. Though the journey was fraught with challenges, it ultimately led to a newfound sense of freedom and fulfillment. As I reflected on the events that had unfolded, I couldn't help but feel grateful for the lessons learned and the strength gained along the way. With each passing day, I looked towards the future with hope and optimism, ready to embrace whatever challenges and opportunities lay ahead. Jessica's words resonated deeply within me, offering a glimmer of hope amidst the complexities of life. It was true that changing one's personality and mindset, especially after years of conditioning, could be a daunting task. Yet, Jessica's unwavering belief in the power of love to instigate change filled me with optimism. As I sipped my tea, a sense of liberation washed over me. The weight of my past life as a dutiful wife and caretaker fell away, leaving behind a newfound sense of freedom and authenticity. No longer bound by the expectations of others, I felt empowered to chart my own course, guided by my desires and aspirations. With each passing day, I embraced the opportunity to live life on my own terms, unapologetically and authentically. Freed from the constraints of my former life, I embarked on a journey of self-discovery and personal growth, determined to make the most of every moment. As I reflected on the tumultuous events that had led me to this point, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the lessons learned and the strength gained along the way. Though the road ahead was uncertain, I faced it with courage and conviction, secure in the knowledge that I was finally living life on my own terms.